Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Christensen with One Sage's View Astrology, and we are continuing on with the video for the promo tour for the Bridgerton series I'm doing on Nicola Coughlan and Luke Newton. This video is going to focus on Luke because we have already completed Nicola's focus on Dublin. And so this will focus on what the energies, the planetary transits were for Luke when he was in Dublin. And just to kind of expand on some of the information, definitely see that Jupiter as the planet that is responsible for Luke's eighth house, because he's in an eighth house annual perfection at the age of 31, is making, really enhancing what he's getting from the transit, as that is in the 11th house of his friends and allies, because that Jupiter that had recently gone into Gemini right before they got to Toronto, and that shifted the energy that everybody felt. As they're in Dublin, it's just a part of the stellium, and it's adding to the mix. And I think it's super important because you always have to look at an individual's natal Jupiter and where it is placed in the chart to kind of figure what is the quality of the planet in the natal chart in terms of what house it sits in, and then how does that have visibility to the first house of the individual. Luke's Jupiter is in the third house in Libra, so it does have a visibility to the first house of Leo, and that is under the assumption that he is the Leo rising based on the information from that BuzzFeed interview. There is a possibility, if that was misquoted for any reason, if he is a Leo moon Virgo rising, but I think along the way I'm showing that it's a strong case for Leo rising to be true, and it's in the beginning of Leo, and that gives the Cancer moon. So Jupiter, going back to Jupiter, it's important that we look at the transit, and his natal Jupiter is also in the element of air. Libra is cardinal air, and it's masculine and a yang sign. So the importance of kind of looking at what is Jupiter aspecting, how is it placed, and those kinds of things give us some information. Now, in his chart, he also has the stellium in Aquarius in his natal chart, so that Jupiter has a lot of extra lift. I would call it lift because it has that aspect of being in the same element. So there's a trine, so it's easy flow energy in terms of navigating, unlike having a lot to socialize with in terms of the Aquarian energy in his seventh house, but also that he has a south node in Gemini. So he has a lot to understand about his south node ruler Mercury, which is also in the seventh house. So much of Luke's life is going to be focused on another person that's a significant other. As I have described before, significant other is like a romantic partner that's a committed relationship, or a spouse, whenever he decides to marry, if he should ever decide to marry. But it's also a committed legal relationship. So I also look at it as his co-star sitting in that seventh house, and that co-lead relationship that he has with Nicola. But you can overlay other significant relationships at the same time as a part of that, who he's working with as one from the co-lead perspective, but also the significant relationship with Antonia. I'd also, and how that picks up for the other person is based on their own chart and their soul interaction, and what I think of as soul contracts that we have with individuals that are a part of our life. So his Jupiter, third house, it's about learning about communication. It's learning about balancing things, how to, understand the environment and how to keep things in harmony, or that he desires that. That's how he learns about relationships and communications and perceptions of things. And so he's working a lot with that energy. And third house is also siblings. So I'd also look at his relationship with, I think his sister's name is Lauren. So Jupiter expands all those things but he's not in a third house annual perfection. He's in an eighth house annual perfection, being age 31. And so it's about Jupiter, and eighth house themes are more important, not third house themes. The third house themes are kind of like it will participate because Jupiter actually sits in the third house. So perception, communication, these kinds of things are important. And the sister will probably be part of that in some way, somewhere in the storyline of the year that he's 31, and significant kind of awareness and true, because as Luke moves into fame, the connection to his sister also is visible, right? But it's more about the eighth house themes. And the eighth house themes are more about the partner's resources, the partner's values, but it's also like things like sexual themes and taboo themes, the occult, which includes like astrology, tarot, and so forth. And in this year of him being 31, he was definitely focusing in on astrology, as we've learned. And so it's kind of interesting to see how his world is expanding through this year of being 31. What's so interesting is also that, how much the friend group was brought in, and that the transiting Jupiter being in his 11th house of friends in the transit. So we're going to dive into it, get into some of that information, but I want to kind of preface this video with that to kind of keep it focused around that. But you're going to learn some other things as well. I think another thing to kind of keep in mind, because his 8th house is Pisces, and Pisces is about feeling. It's about a lot of feeling and emotion. I mean, Pisces is like the spectrum of all of the zodiac, because it's the last sign of the 12. And so it's kind of interesting to see that, and also imagination, how that might be a part of the mix of the themes. So, and I really don't talk about that in the video per se as much, but I think it's really important to kind of step back and kind of look at what are the emotions that are kicking up different things across the year, and how much Luke is visible, and then how much he then is invisible, not visible, right? And then how much feeling is being evoked because of Luke, and then what he then expands on. And we're only getting partial understandings of that because he is a private person. So whatever we get revealed to us, but it's definitely it's a year where a lot of feeling is being expanded. And Dublin, I think, is an interesting stop on the promo tour for season 3, because of landing in Ireland, which is Nicola's home country. And Dublin is a huge metro area and then, how many fans would be there for her in Dublin. And of course, it's explosive for them. And, just how it all was absorbed, and how then that expands his own consciousness and his participation in the whole. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please give a thumbs up. Do subscribe if you want to join the live that I have. I am going to be doing a live very soon, but by the time this video hits, it's going to be probably another live. So join me on the lives on the weekend, but I encourage people to subscribe, because on some of them, you really have to be a subscriber to join. And it's just the subscribe to my channel. It's not like it's a paid thing or anything yet, not yet. But I just want you to enjoy the astrology for now. I'll decide on the other things soon, but I hope you enjoy, because this is for you and everything Bridgerton. Thanks so much. Here we go. And now we're going to go over to Luke's chart. And I need to jump over there. So here's Luke. I think I even put my arrows on Luke's. I forgot to do that on Nicholas. But on Luke's chart, we are looking at, the inner circle is Luke's natal chart, of course. One of the things I noticed absolutely in Dublin is the soft, easy flow between the Pisces 29 Neptune. He doesn't control that energy. It's something that's happening within him and his perception. It's kind of happening in a little bit of the hidden place, but it's leaning so close to his 9th house. It's kind of related to being in international travel, and that's part of the promo tour, and the feeling nature. There's a lot of feelings registering while in Ireland, okay? And that's because the moon, I think, for Luke, based on if we have a Leo rising for Luke, we're looking at, his moon around 27, 28, even maybe 29 of Cancer, right? So I want to point out that that's an easy flow. So there's a lot of feelings coming between that of another person. This is the feelings of another person and his registering it. Makes sense? Because that's his 8th house. 8th house to him personally is a bit of a blind spot, but when it's water to water, it's hitting his unconscious part of himself in his feeling nature. So he's at the feeling level. And because Luke has so much water in his chart, because of the Pluto, Moon, Mars, and then he has Saturn and Neptune by transit, activating a lot of energy in his 8th house of what's hidden from him, yet is there. But it's also the part of self that is the other person that we value. So over in the respect to Nicola as very close friend, BFF, whatever's co-lead, and what they feel. So it's there, it's amplifying it. right? And what I think we could also pull that down as like a triangle of energy, so it really amplifies it a lot. So I thought, oh, there's a lot of energy getting picked up by his moon in that period of time. But he's a very cerebral person as well. And so all the Gemini energy of that transiting Gemini are activating and building towards his south node. That's close enough to be activating it, but the sun in 2 days will activate his south node, and Venus in a couple of days also, because there's the cazimi of the sun and Venus. So to me, there's a bonding going on with his friend Nicola, and it's activating something that activates her south node storyline. So there's bonding that has to be present for that to engage the storyline. Activates his Venus, because when you have the transiting Venus activating something, then you have to look back where is Venus in the natal chart. That's in his 9th house of international travel, but it's also around philosophy and things like that, and what he's going to learn about himself through that experience, okay? Because a lot of people learn more about themselves when they're traveling long distances. It's kind of like when you think about the ancient world, when they would go on travels to go to Delphi or something like that, in terms of having that spiritual quest to visit a temple or something like that. There was a spiritual process that was happening, and a heightened attention towards the divine, towards God, okay? Their god, goddess. Okay. And so like ancient times, that would have been Athena, or that would have been Aphrodite, temples of Aphrodite, temples of Apollo, temples of Zeus, etc. Okay. So for Luke in the Dublin promo, he has Pluto opposite his moon, opposite his ascendant, likely. Okay. The way I have it, with the time probably putting his ascendant somewhere in the first 5 degrees, maybe 10 degrees of Aquarius. There is, ascendant in Leo. Some have made the argument that he could be, if he's born much later, then it would be an ascendant in Virgo. There is a possibility if he's born after like 5:30 or 6 p.m. that could be the case. And of course, we can explore that in a future video, as I had noted early on in the series. But to me, the way things were mapping out in the mirroring effect of Luke and Nicola when they're together, it seemed that the argument to me is like it's probably in those first part of degrees of Leo for his ascendant. And so the Pluto by transit in Aquarius at the moment of Dublin is opposite and intensifying. So when you have that intensification, there is a transformation that's happening truly. Now here's what's interesting. I love this part. Remember maybe it was when they're having the tea and the cakes and the blindfold on, and after that they take off and then they're eating their tea and cake, or I can't remember the cookies, but they have cookies. And she mentions that you're going to be the internet's boyfriend, or you're going to be so famous. What's so funny is like she doesn't acknowledge her own like potential, like that she will be the internet's girl, the girl, the it girl, the woman of the moment. I mean, she projected stuff onto Luke, right? And that's notable in his chart with the Pluto on the opposition there, that she's the one having the bigger transformation. That Pluto is not in his first house, it's in his 7th house. It's the partner. So what's interesting about Luke is to kind of explore like, okay, the partner he's facing in the promo tour is Nicola as best friend, as co-lead. Now I do that because the contractual agreement person is 7th house, right? Co-lead. However, I could argue the same thing is going on for Antonia. Antonia is going to go into a massive transformation herself with everything that's going to hit in 6 days, right? So, and we'll go into her chart outside of the series, the playlist that I'm doing for Bridgerton. That'll be on my chart analysis here in the coming weeks, because she's forced to go through a transformation. Part of it, she wants to be in that spotlight, and she's going to be learning her own soul lessons, and that's part of the path, because that's what's showing up. Because you kind of have to take a look at reality straight on and say, okay, that's what's occurring and what I can see, and then what transpires over the summer, of course. And there's a lot with that, but there was a lot of things behind the scenes that could be seen with those who were savvy enough with social media, could and have been observing behaviors, and then how that then affected maybe that relationship. And I'll discuss that later. But also she had Pluto as a part of that connection with Luke. And so I think it's important to point that out, because he's forced also to look at, what do I want out of that other person? Because he's always looking at the loop of myself and other, and that myself and other, he's really looking at, that's the sun, and he identifies so closely. So when he's close with his group of friends and how that materialized, he was in that loop with what might have been pointed in his direction. I don't know if he might have found that connection with Antonia on Raya. I don't know. I can't confirm that. I don't have receipts. I'm just, at some point they got together. Okay, whatever. But it had a purpose that was part of the soul storyline that would break open for Luke. Okay. And also for Nicola. To me, it's important that there were 3 people that would be connected for the whole storyline to play, for the soul contract stuff to show the evolutionary intentions of the souls. Okay. Every person has their participation point. I don't have Antonia's rising sign at all, so I can't really say where her north node and south node is in a house. I can say what it is by sign, and so I can have some information on that, and I will discuss that in future video. But yeah, anyway, for Luke in Dublin, there is the intensification towards his south node. It's not, as you can see, it hasn't materialized down to the 18 degrees yet to hit it right on, jackpot or target. So it's very close, right? And so that's going to be materializing those things and those themes as it comes around. What else for Luke? Oh, South Node storyline. Okay, so Luke's South Node, I think, is connected to multiple people. So it brings up more than one scenario. So we have the scenario with Nicola for sure, his comfort and discomfort in the public eye, his experience around his own intelligence. Does he have the right information? And then how he feels about experience around how he speaks in groups of things. And so the Gemini is emphasizing that there's been an emphasis in the promo tour on Luke Newton and his ADHD and how uncomfortable he might be, and anxiety, the two together. And then his response of holding hand is a part of that, and what Nicola's perception or how we perceive Nicola, and but there could be another layer that really hasn't been addressed that Nicola did experience but not discussed, right? I mean, there's parts of ourselves we don't open up publicly because we want to keep that private. And so I think with all the energy in Gemini in his 11th house of group consciousness, it's activating his Mercury, and then that activates his square. And you still have this volatile energy between the transiting Uranus towards the Pluto. And so this hasn't happened yet because Uranus is very, very precise. So when it tips over into 25 degrees and such minutes of his own opposite to his natal Pluto, then that's the opening for the psyche to delve into, like to understand this framework, his experience in relation to someone else, and public passion and illusion, delusion, obsessiveness behavior. That opens that up because it's social media is Aquarius, and how fast information travels and all that kind of what is in the conversation, that's Gemini, and the mutable, how things can change, the perceptions can change, this and that, the energy of positive and negative energy charge. Okay. And then his career is Taurus. So that's 10th house's career, public persona, Taurus. And he has a lot of volatility with Uranus being transiting. That can be the thing that leaps you out in the public eye, but also can be the thing that, that's very unstable out there. Venus is being activated, and so then he gets the perception of what's changed for him in the body. That's also the Pluto opposite the ascendant, the change up there, opposite the moon especially. And then the Venus being activated through the promo tour, but then how that materializes in him receiving projections on either or, positive, negative. But then it's the whole fandom activity as they relate to Luke's public persona in relation to somebody. So there's one that is preferred, one that's more positive that we've observed, but there's deeper truths about his free will, or also something that internally he needs to experience, or it wouldn't be understood for the rest of his journey. And So, that's something very, very personal for a soul. And only if he were to sit with a trusted astrologer, person, or even like astrologer slash, someone who has depth psychology combination, can get at this even deeper, right? Because there's so much energy there. I think what he's learned probably is the power of who sits in the seventh house of partner and their capacity for having walked a similar walk, and how they control and manage is a better word, how they manage the narrative because of their own experience of understanding what it is, and how someone who's managed that kind of hardcore energy, negative energy coming at them, will know how to put up the boundary or navigate it with some strategic direction. So it's like, well, if I'm going to be in the spotlight, I'm going to leverage it, and I'm going to use it in a way that I don't care what you say about me. I'm leveraging this, and I'm going to harness it and use it for something that I believe in, that will make the world a better place, a safer place. If the person that he holds that committed relationship with doesn't have a high bar for what they stand for in the public eye and can stick to that and navigate the noise, then that's going to be super challenging, even for someone who is famous and has never experienced a negative burst from public. Wouldn't understand that, right? Like that, it matters that someone has maybe already walked the path that's dealt with negative commentary, online commentary before, and how they will walk it, how they maneuver through that and not let it, bother them. And so they continue on, right? So, because they've learned. So I think there's a lot maybe being registered by Luke while he's on the red carpet and in the interviews in Dublin about the passion that people have for Nicola, and how he's so proud of her as well, because that's his, very, very close friend at a minimum, likely more felt deeper, but not necessarily acknowledged. And that's what we see in the body language. It doesn't mean it's been consciously brought forward all the way, if that makes sense. Yeah. So what else about Luke's chart? Let me clean up this a little bit here for you. I think all of this Gemini energy, and that it's activating his south node, or absolutely building the energy towards it, as all of that's coming. And it's also, remember, this is a balsamic moon. This is a moon that's about to go new, but it's not yet new. And I should probably look up that date, because this is June 6th, and I don't remember the new moon date in June. Let me just see if I can find it real quick, because that would start a new cycle, a lunar cycle, right? And there's new energy with new lunar cycles. And I believe, so that is so close that it's actually happening later that day. So the new moon is actually, okay, so my books are in Pacific time at 5:38 a.m. my time. So that on June 6th was a new moon, 5:38 my time, and I think Dublin is 8 or 9 hours, so you add, so about 1 p.m. Yeah, it's just like 1 hour later, we're going to have a new moon. So you have the transition between what might be happening in the interviews and those, ending, but then what is then reseated, because when you have a balsamic moon that goes into a new moon within the hour, and events are happening on all this day. And so the actual premiere that's going on in Dublin is probably after 1 o'clock p.m. anyway. So it's definitely happening in the new moon. And so what was seeded in the interviews and shared, and some of those won't come out until a couple days later, right? Or after. So the radio shows might have been more local, and they would have had that. But what was shared on social media would come out like a day later, maybe. They might have came out the same day. But I think it's important to kind of understand how like the past cycle will seed the new cycle with something. So as they go into the new moon, that's interesting, right? So just to pull in the new moon happening at 16 degrees, 18 minutes, which is, you've got a Cazimi Venus happening on the new moon on June 6th. And so that's super powerful in itself, that something is being seeded at that moment, that about their bonds, about things that are communicated, and then what is then hitting his conscious awareness of other, and then maybe the excitement and obsessiveness that comes from people and what they look at for Nicola. It's his observation of Nicola while they're in Dublin, especially on the red carpet premiere, where he's seeing the intensification of the energy. And he not only sees the intensification of energy, but he's observing her feeling nervous now, and her, visible feeling overwhelmed by the energy. Usually it's been him, so he's kind of checking in on her. So it's almost like this interesting shared experience around the intensification of the energy and what that means. But it's like he can now reflect back on each promo tour city and think about the energy and the volume and the way, and that it's not just the people cheering and saying things and all that energy, but it's also all the heart energy that's being burst out from people in the moment, and you're sitting in that energy, right? So he'll have that recollection as he reflects on things as well, and that's his understanding this part of his chart as well, this Mercury, because Mercury is also, Mercury's right here. Mercury at 6 Gemini is a part of the stellium. And as the day goes on, Mercury will, of course, hit the midheaven, and then it will, in the coming couple days, will come across the south node. And so that amplifies the south node theme. And so it's kind of like you have to have the crowds for Luke to see certain things and have the obsessiveness happening for him to observe, have his own experience with it, but it's also the experience of the partner within that realm, and also his other significant person, Antonia, is going to experience when all the flash bulbs hit her on June 12th, and then what that will unravel. That will take some time to unravel, but it gets to the heart of the soul's intention to learn something about relationships. And of course, this is a past relationship as it pertains to Nicola, but it's not just Nicola's past relationship, it is also Antonia. Antonia is a part of the mix of past life experience that comes to the fore. There has to be 3, and how that plays out. And you have different scenarios. One is super famous and one is not. Someone coming from obscurity comes into prominent view and upsets the apple cart, as they say. And then how one will navigate the obsessive interest and the other, how they handle it. So he'll have different points of perspective to explore these themes. And it's important for him to explore these themes because his North Node is in Sagittarius, is ruled by Jupiter. It ties in the relationship and how he communicates, what he communicates, but it's also his philosophy and also how he cares about his characters that he creates, in this case, Colin. But he'll have others that he creates and people will have opinions on them or whatnot. So Aquarius has a strong ability to be objective. Leo, so his sun being in the 7th house, is that person that's mature in their understanding of self and the presentation of themselves, has the emotional intelligence to be more objective. He's learning from that. He projects that part of himself onto someone else, but there's a part of himself that's the immature part who he's also has a projection with. So when we look at this, I have never mentioned this, I don't think. When we look at the equation between Luke and Nicola, there's one point of perception between self and other he has, and what he's projecting onto her that he doesn't necessarily identify as his own yet, and then that of Antonia. So he has a viewpoint of Antonia that he has projected to her, she projects to him, and there's cross there as well. So it's just parts of Luke being visibly represented for him that he's not necessarily yet owned in himself, and finds he's learning about that because his life has so much emphasis in other. To learn about other, he learns about a lot of energy by that significant partner, right? So, and you can go back and do the same thing with Jade. He learned something about that with Jade. He learned something about that with Sophie, and any other, relationship long enough for him to integrate something. Let's just say that. And I don't I'm not privy to all of his other relationships, if there were other smaller relationships, but it's kind of like those that bear in some time, right? They're going to, of course, a lot of his relationships will have the bearing of time because he has Saturn in the 7th house, and Saturn always has you need time to understand it, okay, and integrate what you're observing and become objective about it. I hope that makes sense. There's also, which I had mentioned in Nicola's detail in Dublin, the Saturn in Pisces. Let's go back to Saturn Pisces. Saturn Pisces is so important right now. I know it was somewhere he mentioned that it was in Toronto about his psychic ability, psychic awareness, which I think even by claiming that in Toronto in that interview, he's become aware of it, right? To even say, it says that and I am that. Like you claim it even though you don't fully understand what that means. That's a part of the equation. Unless he has, he's been made aware of astrology. And that's the first step in to becoming more aware of that. But the more you activate something by practicing it, learning about it, studying it, or having someone who's been on the path before you, who has turned on that part of the self and can help be as a guide, because I would think Luke needs a guide in this manner. I don't know if Nicola is the guide for that part of himself. It might be someone else. I wouldn't say that she's opened the astrology, but when he mentioned his, potential for psychic awareness, there was a little bit of a giggle out of Nicola. So I don't know if she acknowledges that potential that absolutely sits within him, because the ruler of Pisces is Jupiter. And I think in time he will learn more about how he communicates, his perception, and the balance of energy, because Libra is about the harmony within the environment and what it is. And the more he is tuned into his intuition, that's turning on that part of his self, right? And so Pisces is about the feeling nature, but that you can get images, feelings, scent, like, you can smell something or you can hear it. Sometimes people taste things when they're mediums, when they're relaying information. There's different, ways that comes in, but that's the potential there, right? And the fact that it's in the 8th house is also the potential of the values. So in time, maybe others around him, he will find others who value that and will open up that part. Maybe not. I don't know. It's suggested in his chart, the way we have it here. So, and Jupiter is also responsible for his North Node. I'm curious if he'll do a future, I wonder if he'll do a future piece of, acting in a play or a movie or another series or something where that part of the self comes out in a character, because I think if he delves into it into as a character with such skills, then I think it will definitely be emphasized in his own awareness, because that's the way he is kind of wired, right? Like he'll dive into something when it's a character. And then when he dives into it as a character, then he'll dive into it for himself. So yeah, because he has the Sagittarius North Node. And so that Jupiter is about the relationships, but it's kind of like, does he have, some future project where that's interesting? I love movies. I love shows. I love storytelling. And I love how that we as humans, we understand ourselves through story. Anyone who's acting, they are the storytellers. And I kind of look at those who really delve into the minute things that they can do to portray character is fascinating to me. And how that then helps us understand ourselves, either as the person diving into the subject material and going through all of the things, all of the feelings, and then acting that out. There is a visceral experience of that kind of energy, right? And that's why I love looking at astrology for actors, because they will take on certain things when they're playing parts, but there's parts in their chart that just get lit up with certain things that they do. So, and in this case, Luke Newton, absolutely, and how he played Colin Bridgerton, and the relationships that he has, and how he is perceived in those relationships across the ton in his characters. It's still fascinating to me about all the layers that we get out of Bridgerton. And I think that's why it remains fascinating, and it's still a magnifying thing that we're attracted to. So So what else do I want to point out here? For Luke in Dublin, also still have, this Aries. So when you have this Aries, all this energy here, and you have Gemini, those are sextile to each other. That's 60, you have two signs like that. You have Taurus in between. You have high energy instincts happening in a lot of energy on publishing. So he would show up in a lot of magazines, right? That's a part of that Aries in his chart. International tour. So he's bouncing through many countries, a lot of planes, a lot of that energy there. But also that the North Node is in his ninth house of those travels, and his midheaven is ninth house, but midheaven is also part of the career. So his career has that international flair to it. And so it'll take him to those places that will have him on a plane and using his passport. So, and that is, the instinctual raw energy of, and it takes courage to do the thing. That's also Aries. But Aries is also, can be, and especially when Mars is in that sign, it's a point where you can trip up on things, in the timing of something or activating a part of the self that is more the passion part of self coming forward. But it has the potential for having some strife, and also because that's just Mars. Mars is, conflict, how we address conflict, or, how things could get out of hand if he didn't have tight security and those kinds of things. So there's an awareness of, that in the mind about like how is the environment when we're going into something, and what does that look like? Because his Mars is very much centered on how safe is it, his Mars in Cancer, right? How do I take care of myself, but also how do I take care of other people I care about, especially the women in my life. So that Aries is activating a lot for him. I don't think anything is, the Chiron is close to the point where the total solar eclipses, but other promo stops would have that more right on the nose in terms of right on that degree. But it's more that when you have all the energy being sextile, it means that those planets in transit are communicating with each other. Things are happening very quickly, dynamically, and have a lot of energy underneath them. Something new, something that not seen before, something pioneering. And I think, as many have said, that the promo tour for Bridgerton season 3 with these two, Luke and Nicola, is going to be something that's probably studied by others. And I think I've seen a little bit of that on another pair, and I'll talk about that later. But yeah, so others are maybe attempting the same, but I don't know if they're going to get the same result. Because they might play that, but it won't play out the same because they don't have the same charts, if that makes any sense. There's something that's super important about having the compatibility of the two natal charts that come together, and then the dynamic of a moment of, how the things can heighten the exchange from the individuals when they're collectively together, like Luke and Nicola at these events, and then how that is picked up by fans and other people who might not have known them before even seeing some social media or some interview about them, and then that picked up their interest. So that's important to point out. So I think I've covered a lot of things on Luke. Maybe the other thing is maybe the vertex, but the vertex is something that moves pretty quickly when you're changing the time. So it is activating his Mercury in this part of the day. So that's kind of something that's registering this block of energy again. So he's getting, and it will not register until some time has passed in having some reflection on it. That's important. And the other is that the 27 of the vertex of Aquarius activating his Mercury, that's important, but it also activates at a trine to all this energy building toward it. It's more that it's trine to his sun. Let me point that out. That's maybe more potent. Is the sun is trine. That is exactly trine. Air. And that is, the flow of the easiest flow for friendship, for having a good time, funny, social, all those dynamics he's feeling that, he's experiencing that with Nicola in Dublin. And, the heightened fun of it, the heightened, the energy volume, and he will have a point where he'll get to understand kind of the differences of the energy as time moves on. But that during the moment, it's that feel good with friends and feel good in the community, feel good with just the social aspect of it, right? That he's registering and being in somewhere where his best friend is from, like That's her home country. It's even more intense in Galway, but it's absolutely super intense as it sets in the seeds of the new moon in a couple hours. Like it's probably 1 or 2 o'clock when that new moon, I'll have to double check what time it would be in Dublin, but I think that's important. So all the things registering, so much interesting stuff in Dublin. I think I've covered a bulk of what I wanted to for Luke. So both have their own things that they're picking up and is settling into the unconscious mind, because it will pick up something in the present moment. And when it's really buzzing, like this is energy that's super buzzing, and for them it has to settle down, and when it settles down into the unconscious again, it goes back into the we have moments, and then it settles into the unconscious mind when we go to sleep. And then what we pick up and are more aware of, and when things are recorded, there's a remembrance of that, so they have a lot of things that they can go back and look at during the promo tour because it was recorded, that then they can go back to that energy and feel it again and register those moments. And then as they start, if they go into those reflective moments, a lot of great memories, but there's also a soul lesson deeply embedded in this that is available for them. It's an opportunity to open up and grow something by, okay, that didn't go as I hoped, or I didn't have control over that, so it's how I responded. But all of the feelings in my heart that came forward because of something were super important, because that's what is being activated. And that is the thing that days, weeks, and months, and for some people can take a few years. It's not like instant. Some things take time. Some things that are deeply, deeply a part of our unconscious mind will only get little fragments that might come forward for us to work on, and it gives us a little bit, right? I mean, evolution is not always a fast process, right? It can take eons. And we retrace old things again and again to reconfigure it and have a new point of perspective on something to evolve that thing. And Luke is leaning into understanding his creative self. That's the North Node in the 5th house. His love relationships, his way he communicates in relationship, because he has Jupiter in Libra. South Node, friends, what's going on there. And then also the different roles and the intensity of energy, negative and positive, that can happen through his significant other and what he observes in relationship to him, in relationship to that other person, and why that is important for him as he learns about past, because the past can be the thing that's the block. And then once you get your feet on the ground about the block and acknowledge it, and then start to move through it, you got to take it by the reins, then you can evolve it, right? And so that is part of that, is him realizing the importance of his life being so focused on other, and how important it is of the other person's feet on the ground and how they make him feel, and then how that then either supports his life or not. There are certain things that we want to experience, but does it have like foundational support for all the things of the life? The philosophy, that's the North Node philosophy, good communication, the balance there, and then how that can expand his life. Because if the partner is not chosen well, it can have a very adverse effect. Okay. So I think, all of that's super powerful. Dublin, I love Dublin. I think they learned a lot in Dublin. And so I hope you had fun, and we will finish this up. And next, we're going to be exploring Galway and all the signs and things that are happening in a new moon moment, because the next day we're definitely in full day is in new moon when they go to Galway, and that's the new moon in Gemini, so the Gemini lunar month, and there's something about that as well, and I'll talk about that in the next video. But until next time, I hope you have enjoyed this and our exploration into Nicola and Luke in their promo tour in Dublin, Ireland. Thanks so much, and look forward to seeing you next time.